Instructor said, "No weapon can stop it." The human cadet loaded one anyway. The academy was quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that made the new cadets nervous. Outside, the sun barely touched the tall towers, and the wind moved through the metal corridors with a soft whistle. Lucas Carter walked slowly, his boots echoing on the metal floor. He was a human cadet in a school mostly filled with aliens, and he knew everyone expected humans to be smaller, weaker, and slower. That did not bother him. He had learned early that humans survived not by being the strongest, but by thinking when others panicked. The briefing hall was filled with cadets sitting in neat rows. Lucas found a seat near the middle, next to a small group of aliens with green skin and large eyes. They stared at him for a moment, whispering in low tones. Lucas ignored them and pulled out his datapad. Today, the lesson would be about the breaker. The breaker was a word that sent shivers through every cadet in the galaxy. It was an alien organism, enormous and almost impossible to destroy. Entire fleets had been wiped out when the breaker had appeared in a system. Even the most advanced weapons had failed. The humans in the room, small and fragile compared to most species, had only survived because the breaker had not yet focused on Earth. Lucas had never seen it, but he had read everything about it. Every report said one thing: no weapon could stop it. Commander Alan Brooks entered the hall, tall and rigid, with the uniform pressed perfectly. He was human, which made him one of the few humans in a position of real authority at the academy. His face was serious, and his eyes scanned the room with a sharp, calculating look. "Cadets," he said, his voice deep and steady, "today you will learn about a threat that no fleet has ever survived. It is called the Breaker. You will study its patterns, its behavior, and why all weapons fail against it. Listen carefully, because your survival depends on understanding why retreat is sometimes the only option." The cadets nodded, some more eagerly than others. Lucas, however, felt a spark in his chest. Retreat was not a human word. Humans retreated when they had to, yes, but not when there was a chance to fight. He sat up straighter, listening intently as Commander Brooks showed images on the large screen at the front. The first image appeared, a black mass with moving spines that glowed faintly. It looked like a floating nightmare. Lucas felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The aliens in the room whispered among themselves, and some of them looked away. Lucas, however, stared hard. He could not imagine how any weapon could fail if it was aimed properly. Surely, there was some way. Commander Brooks continued, "The Breaker is not just a physical threat. It adapts faster than any known AI. It heals itself faster than our medical technologies can repair damage. It has no weakness that we have discovered. Every fleet sent against it has been destroyed completely." A cadet with blue skin raised a tentacle-like hand. "Then why do we even study it? Why not avoid it entirely?" Brooks looked at him with a stern expression. "Because someday it may come to your system and avoidance will not always be possible. You must know what you face. Understanding its patterns is the first step in surviving long enough to retreat. No cadet should ever assume they can defeat it. Humans, aliens, everyone." Lucas clenched his fists under the desk. Everyone was thinking about retreat, everyone but him. He had spent nights imagining scenarios in which a small weapon, properly placed, could strike the Breaker's weak points. He had made notes, sketches, calculations. Even if the data said no weapon could stop it, Lucas did not believe that no weapon ever could. The lecture continued for hours. Brooks showed simulations of fleets attacking the Breaker. In every scenario, the ships fired thousands of shots, beams cutting through space like ribbons of light. The Breaker absorbed them, moved unpredictably, and destroyed the attackers in minutes. The simulations were flawless, terrifying. Most cadets sat silently, absorbing the lesson with fear. Lucas, however, felt his mind working faster than ever. He noticed small details that Brooks did not mention. He saw patterns in the Breaker's movement, tiny pauses that could be exploited. After the lecture, cadets were dismissed to the training rooms. Lucas walked with his friend, a small alien named Talai who had pinkish skin and 3 thin eyes. "Lucas," Talai said, "why do you look so serious? Everyone else is talking about how hopeless it is." Lucas shrugged. "I'm not hopeless. I don't think any problem is impossible if you try the right way." Talai raised an eyebrow. "That sounds human." Lucas laughed. "It is. Humans survive by refusing to give up, even when everything says they should." They entered the simulation chamber, a large room filled with holographic projectors. Cadets were expected to run scenarios against small-scale models of the breaker. Lucas pulled out his datapad and started feeding in different angles and velocities, ignoring the standard program. The other cadets followed the preloaded scenarios. Within minutes, every holographic ship was destroyed in the simulation, just like the lecture had shown. Lucas's ships, however, moved differently. They targeted the few points where the breaker hesitated, firing in sequences that seemed chaotic but were carefully calculated. Instructor Dana Morris walked by, a human woman with sharp eyes and a brisk voice. She stopped behind Lucas. "What are you doing, Carter? That is not the protocol." Lucas did not look up. "I know the protocol, ma'am. I'm just testing an idea," Morris sighed. "The protocol exists because every other method fails. You should follow it or you will be marked as reckless." Lucas finally looked up. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the data is wrong because no one has tried the right approach yet. Morris shook her head and walked away. Lucas smiled faintly. He had expected this. Humans were often punished for thinking differently, but history showed that thinking differently often saved lives. As the day went on, the cadets rotated through drills and exercises. Lucas kept his small ship simulations running, noting patterns in the breaker's responses. He wrote down timing sequences, angles of attack, even the speed at which the holographic attacks seemed to trigger a reaction. By the end of the day, he had a long list of variables and ideas. Most of it was dismissed as impossible, but Lucas did not care. He had learned early that impossible did not mean it could not be done. That night, the cadets returned to their living quarters. Lucas sat alone on the small balcony, staring at the stars. The academy was high above the planet's surface, and the sky stretched endlessly. He thought about Earth, fragile and small, yet full of people who survived catastrophes no alien could understand. Humans had faced famine, disease, wars, and disasters that should have destroyed them. Yet here they were, surviving, adapting, fighting when necessary. Lucas clenched his fists and whispered to himself, "No weapon can stop it. We'll see about that." The thought was quiet, almost foolish, but it filled him with energy. Tomorrow he would start testing small weapons, old ones thought useless, modified with angles and timing. He did not know if it would work, but he did know one thing. Humans did not accept impossible as the final answer. And as he looked out into the dark, he imagined the breaker floating somewhere in the galaxy, waiting, unstoppable to everyone else. But Lucas Carter had a spark in his mind, a question that no simulation had answered, and a determination that no lecture could crush. He would find a way. For the first time, he felt the weight of what being human truly meant. Not the strongest, not the fastest, but the one who refuses to stop. Even when the universe says you cannot win the next morning, Lucas woke early. The sun was just beginning to rise above the distant horizon, casting long shadows across the academy towers. Most cadets were still asleep, tired from the lectures and exercises of the previous day. Lucas, however, could not rest. He had spent hours thinking about the breaker, about its strength, its speed, and the way all weapons seemed useless. He knew the simulations showed it could not be stopped, but he had already seen patterns that no one else noticed, patterns that might give him a chance. He went to the training armory first. The room smelled of oil and metal, and racks of old weapons lined the walls. Most cadets did not pay attention to these old models. They were considered obsolete, too slow, too weak, or too simple for modern combat, but Lucas saw potential. He picked up a kinetic cannon, a weapon humans had used decades ago in small fleet battles. It was simple, mechanical, and heavy in his hands. The cadets who passed by looked at him strangely. Why would anyone waste time on old weapons when there were advanced plasma rifles and energy disruptors? Lucas did not answer. He had his own ideas, and he knew thinking like everyone else was the fastest way to fail. Instructor Dana Morris appeared again, walking quickly through the armory. "Carter," she said, raising her voice just enough to be heard, "why are you here so early? Cadets are not supposed to train alone before drills. The simulations are ready." Lucas shrugged. "I'm testing ideas. I don't think the simulations are enough. They ignore things that might work in real life." Morris frowned. "You know the rules. The breaker cannot be stopped. Nothing will help your tests. Stop wasting your time or you'll be marked insubordinate." Lucas nodded, but inside he smiled. He had expected this. Humans were often punished for refusing to obey rules blindly. History was full of examples where following rules without thinking had destroyed fleets, armies, and even civilizations. Lucas had no intention of being one of those failures. He spent hours adjusting the old cannon, checking the mechanics, and adding small modifications to improve speed and accuracy. Every time he made a change, he imagined the breaker moving in space, twisting and spinning, dodging attacks, and absorbing energy blasts. He tried to see what no one else had seen, what no simulation had shown. Later, the cadets gathered in the main training room for drills. This time, the instructors set up a larger simulation. A fleet of ships faced a holographic breaker in a detailed 3D map of space. The aliens worked quickly, using every tactic they had learned. Beams fired, missiles launched, ships maneuvered, but no matter what they did, the breaker adapted, healed, and destroyed them. Within minutes, the simulation showed total failure again. Lucas ignored the standard firing program. He moved his small fleet of ships differently. Instead of following the path suggested by the simulation, he altered their speed, angles, and sequences. He fired the kinetic cannons in rapid bursts, not in waves. Each shot aimed for the breaker's hesitation points, the moments where it paused slightly, where its energy flowed differently. Instructor Brooks watched quietly from the back of the room. He had noticed Lucas from the previous day. He did not speak, but he narrowed his eyes. Some humans were unpredictable, and Brooks knew that unpredictability could be dangerous in battle. After several minutes, the holographic breaker reacted differently than in any other simulation. One of Lucas's projectiles struck a point that pulsed weakly and the breaker recoiled slightly. It was tiny, almost unnoticeable to the others, but Lucas saw it. A flicker, a moment of weakness. "Stop the simulation," Morris said sharply. "Carter, what are you doing?" "This is not part of the program." Lucas did not stop. "It's working, just watch." The instructors hesitated. The holographic breaker pulsed again, this time twice, in response to Lucas's firing sequence. Other cadets stared, their jaws open. No one had ever seen this happen. The simulations always ended in total destruction. Morris walked closer, examining the screen. I don't understand," she said quietly. "It shouldn't be possible. The breaker cannot be affected by kinetic weapons." Lucas smiled faintly. "Then maybe no one has tried it like this before. Maybe someone had to look for timing and angles, not power." The room was silent. Even the alien cadets stopped whispering. Brooks stepped forward, his arms crossed. "Carter," he said slowly, "you understand that what you just did could be dangerous if attempted on a real target. The breaker is not a simulation. It is a living organism, adaptive and lethal. One mistake and everything could be destroyed." Lucas nodded. "I understand. But learning what works in a small, controlled test could save lives if it ever appears. Humans do not accept impossible as final." Brooks studied him, his face unreadable. He knew Lucas was bold, maybe reckless, but there was a spark in him. Humans had survived against odds that seemed hopeless before. Sometimes boldness was the difference between survival and extinction. After the simulation, Lucas returned to the armory to continue testing. He worked late into the night, alone, ignoring the tiredness in his muscles and the ache in his eyes. He tested different firing sequences, timing delays, and projectile speeds. Each variation taught him something. He noted how the smallest change could create a momentary reaction in the holographic breaker. Each reaction, though tiny, gave him hope. While he worked, Talia, the small pink-skinned alien, entered quietly. She leaned against the doorway. "You never sleep, Lucas," she said. "Do you think it will help?" Lucas looked at her without stopping his adjustments. "I don't know if it will work. Maybe it won't. But I do know that humans survive by trying when everyone else gives up. If no one tries, we are lost before the fight even starts." Talia nodded slowly. "I think I understand humans are strange, small, weak, but unbreakable." Lucas smiled. "That's exactly it." As the night went on, the academy seemed quiet and empty, but in his mind, Lucas imagined the breaker moving through the stars. Enormous, terrifying, unstoppable to everyone else. But to him, it was just another problem to solve, a puzzle. He studied it, calculated angles, experimented, and planned. He did not know if his efforts would ever face a real breaker. Maybe it would appear tomorrow, maybe never. But he was ready. Even if everyone else said it was impossible, he believed in trying. He believed in humans. The next day brought new lessons, new simulations, and new lectures. Every instructor repeated the same warnings. The breaker was unstoppable. No weapon worked. Retreat was the only option. Cadets whispered about how terrifying it would be if it appeared in their system. They practiced evacuation drills, memorizing escape routes and counting survival chances. Lucas, however, continued to modify his weapons, ignoring protocol. He worked with old cannons, small projectiles, and unusual firing sequences. He imagined how a fleet of human ships could strike together in ways that no one else had ever tried. The simulations had rules, but real combat would not. Real combat was unpredictable, and that unpredictability gave humans their edge. He noticed patterns in the instructor's demonstrations that others missed. Every time the breaker reacted to an attack, there was a brief pause before it adjusted. Every pause, no matter how small, was a chance. Every small chance, repeated, could become a weakness. He calculated timing sequences, delays, and intervals. He imagined a wave of small, carefully timed strikes that could overwhelm even the adaptive defenses of the breaker. The alien cadets continued to doubt him. They whispered behind his back, saying humans were reckless, that no weapon could ever stop the breaker. Lucas ignored them. Humans had survived countless alien civilizations that underestimated them. He knew history. Humans were not the fastest, not the strongest, but they survived by thinking, adapting, and never quitting. One afternoon, Instructor Morris caught him again, watching over his shoulder. "Carter, if you continue ignoring the protocols, you will be punished. You could damage the simulations, injure yourself, or worse. Why do you risk so much?" Lucas looked her in the eye. "Because if we only follow what everyone else says is impossible, we will never survive when it really matters. Humans do not quit. We find a way." Morris stared at him for a long moment, then shook her head. "Humans are strange." Lucas smiled faintly, and proud of it. Over the next few weeks, Lucas continued testing. Small modifications, small successes, small reactions in the simulations. Instructors noted the flickers in the holographic breaker, but no one could explain them. The cadets began to notice. Whispers of hope circulated quietly. A few even watched Lucas carefully, learning from his methods. By the end of the month, Lucas had built a small array of modified kinetic weapons. Nothing large, nothing fancy, just simple projectiles fired in precise sequences. He did not tell anyone about his notes or calculations. They were his secret, a human secret, because humans often succeeded when they acted alone, quietly, and without fanfare. At night, he imagined the breaker in space. Enormous, terrifying, unstoppable to everyone else. But he saw it differently. He saw timing, angles, persistence. He saw that even the impossible could be challenged and maybe defeated by refusing to stop. And Lucas knew, deep down, that when the real breaker appeared, he would be ready. Humans always found a way. The academy was buzzing with tension when the alert sounded. Red lights flashed across the corridors, and alarms echoed through every hall. Cadets rushed to stations, aliens and humans alike moving quickly, but their faces showed fear. The breaker had been detected entering the system. Sensors confirmed it was real this time, not a simulation. It was closer than anyone had ever thought possible, and the alarms made it clear. Evacuation orders were in effect. Lucas Carter felt a cold calm inside him. His heart beat faster, but it was not fear. It was focus. Every lesson, every calculation, every hour he had spent modifying weapons had been for this moment. The breaker was real. It was enormous. It was unstoppable to everyone else. But Lucas did not believe in impossible. Humans survived because they refused to accept that word. Instructor Dana Morris appeared at the control room doorway, her face pale but resolute. "Cadets, this is not a drill. The breaker is approaching fast. All personnel must follow evacuation protocol. Repeat, evacuation protocol." Most cadets began moving immediately, following the evacuation plans drilled into them for weeks. They ran down corridors, climbing into escape pods or rushing to emergency transports. Aliens shouted at each other, giving orders, trying to coordinate. Chaos was everywhere, but Lucas moved differently. He went to the armory. Morris stopped him. "Carter, this is not a training exercise. You cannot fight it. Leave now." Lucas shook his head. "I'm not leaving, not yet. There's a way to test what works, and if we do nothing, everyone will die. I can try." Morris's eyes widened. She had heard humans claim things like this before, but she had never seen one actually follow through. "You're insane," she said softly. "But I don't think I can stop you." Lucas moved quickly, grabbing his modified kinetic cannons and other small projectiles. He carried them to the launch bays, where simulation drones had been stored for drills. He knew he had to act fast. The breaker would arrive in minutes. Every second counted. Talia, the small, pink-skinned alien who had become his friend, followed him quietly. "Lucas," she said, "you could die. Everyone else is leaving. Why are you staying?" Lucas looked at her. "Because leaving doesn't solve anything. If we do nothing, the breaker destroys the station, the fleets, maybe more. I have a chance to do something, even a small chance. Humans survive by trying when others give up." Talia hesitated but did not stop him. She could see the determination in his eyes, the kind of determination that humans were famous for. She nodded and helped him load the weapons into the drones, following his instructions carefully. As they worked, the sensors detected the breaker entering the system. It was massive, larger than any ship, and its surface pulsed with energy that flickered like fire. The cadets watching from safe zones could barely believe the size of it. Its movement was strange, almost alive, with spines twisting and flowing as if sensing everything around it. Brooks and Morris observed from a control room. "It's here," Brooks said, his voice tight. "We've never had a live encounter this close. If it detects the station, all of this could be gone in minutes." Morris looked at Lucas, who was now at the bay controls, checking every weapon, every angle. "He really believes he can do it," she whispered. Brooks said nothing. Humans were unpredictable. Sometimes they succeeded when no one else could. Sometimes they died trying. He hoped this time would be the first. Lucas activated the first drone, sending it into the path of the breaker. The modified cannon fired small projectiles in rapid bursts. The sensors on the breaker pulsed, and for a moment it paused. The moment was tiny, almost invisible, but Lucas saw it. It was exactly what he had predicted. The sequence he had calculated in simulations worked, at least partially, on a real target. He launched another drone, repeating the sequence. The breaker reacted again, this time slightly more. It moved faster, trying to adapt, but the timing of the projectiles exploited the split seconds when it could not adjust. Cadets watching on the monitors gasped. No one had ever seen this happen. Talia helped coordinate the drones, calling out numbers and angles. 10 o'clock, next wave ready, she said. Lucas nodded. Every action had to be precise. There was no margin for error. The breaker was massive, adaptive, and deadly. One mistake and the station could be destroyed. The breaker started moving closer to the station, sensing the defenses. Alarms blared louder. Cadets in evacuation zones panicked. Lucas focused. He ignored the chaos around him. Humans survived by focusing when everyone else panicked. He continued firing drones, adjusting timing, changing angles, modifying sequences in real time. For a moment, the breaker recoiled, a massive shadow shifting across the sensors. It pulsed violently like a heartbeat and then advanced again. Lucas's heart raced, but he did not stop. Every small reaction was a victory, every pause a chance to strike again. Morris and Brooks watched silently. I don't understand it, Morris said. It shouldn't be affected at all. Brooks only nodded. Humans were strange. Their minds worked differently. They saw possibilities no one else could. Sometimes that made the impossible possible. The cadets who had fled began watching from safe distances. Whispers spread. Did you see that? It moved back, it recoiled. The alien cadets were confused and scared. No one had ever seen the breaker react like this. It was supposed to be unstoppable. Lucas launched another wave of drones, each one timed perfectly to exploit the tiny delays in the breaker's movement. The impact was subtle, but consistent. The breaker's surface flickered and pulsed. Its energy seemed to strain under the repeated pressure. Talia's voice was steady as she reported angles and timing. Next wave in 3, 2, 1, the drones fired. Lucas watched the monitors carefully. The breaker staggered, not much, but enough to show that the method worked. Cadets whispered, aliens shouted, but Lucas ignored it. He focused on the next sequence, adjusting for speed and distance, predicting every movement of the massive organism. Minutes passed. It felt like hours. The breaker advanced, pulsing, moving closer to the station, trying to overwhelm the drones. But Lucas stayed calm, calculating, adjusting, repeating sequences. Each wave, each strike, each small pause created tiny openings in what everyone had called an unstoppable force. Finally, there was a larger pulse from the breaker. It recoiled visibly, shuddering under the repeated, precise strikes. The cadets watching could hardly believe it. The impossible was happening. A weapon had, for the first time, affected the breaker. Brooks spoke quietly. Humans, Morris stared at Lucas. You did it. Lucas did not celebrate. He could not. The breaker was still enormous, still deadly. The drones continued to fire, each one timed and coordinated perfectly. He knew the battle was far from over. Humans survived by refusing to stop. The breaker would adapt, yes, but persistence and careful timing could make even the unstoppable falter. Talia smiled faintly. You were right. Humans never give up. Lucas nodded. Never. We survive because we refuse to quit. As the breaker pulsed and recoiled, small cracks of hope spread through the cadets and instructors alike. The impossible had been challenged, not with more firepower, but with careful thought, timing, and persistence. Humans did not accept impossible. They never had. And as the breaker moved closer, ready to test its strength against the station, Lucas prepared the next sequence of attacks. He knew the fight was just beginning. The danger was real, but so was the chance. Humans had a way of turning the impossible into survival. And Lucas Carter was just getting started. The breaker loomed closer to the Academy station, larger than anyone had imagined. Its massive body pulsed with energy, spines twisting like living whips, and its surface shimmered as if made of moving metal. Alarms blared constantly, shaking the walls, and cadets scrambled to follow evacuation procedures. The station was meant to be abandoned in minutes, yet Lucas Carter moved calmly through the control bay, his hands steady on the consoles. Every move, every calculation mattered now. Talia worked beside him, her three eyes wide but focused. Lucas, it's huge, even bigger than the simulations showed. If it reaches the station, we'll make sure it doesn't, Lucas said. Even a tiny opening can be exploited. We just have to be patient and precise. Instructor Dana Morris hovered behind them, her face pale. You really think this will work? One human against a breaker? Lucas did not answer. He had no time for doubt. Humans survived because they acted when others froze. Persistence was often stronger than power. The breaker had survived attacks for centuries because everyone else tried the obvious, the strong, the flashy. Lucas tried subtle timing, angles, sequences that no one else had even imagined. The first wave of drones fired, tiny projectiles moving in patterns that seemed random to the casual observer. But Lucas and Talia followed every pulse of the breaker, every flicker of movement. The massive organism recoiled slightly at each strike. Not much, but enough. A small reaction was all they needed. Brooks watched from the main observation deck. His hands were clasped, his face tight. I've never seen anything like this, he said softly. The breaker shouldn't even react, and yet, Morris shook her head. It's human stubbornness. Reckless but effective. The cadets who had evacuated paused in their safe zones, watching the monitors. Whispers spread like wildfire. Did you see that? It flinched. Humans, did they really do that? The alien cadets looked at each other in disbelief. Every system had said it was impossible. Every instructor had said the same. Yet here, a single human and a few drones caused reactions in the unstoppable force. The breaker lashed its spines, moving faster than sensors could track, but Lucas adjusted the firing sequence in real time. Talia, next wave, left side, rapid fire, timing 0.3 seconds later than before. Talia nodded, sending the drones into position. As the projectiles hit, the breaker shuddered visibly. Its massive form twisted, pulsing with violent energy, but it could not fully adjust. Lucas had found the rhythm in its movement, the tiny delays that made it vulnerable. The instructors watched in awe. No one expected this. The breaker was supposed to destroy everything. But here it was, flinching, reacting to careful, timed attacks. Humans survived not because they were strong, but because they were clever. Inside the control bay, Lucas adjusted once more. He had studied the breaker's reactions for weeks. Every pause, every flicker, every slight recoil was now part of a pattern he could exploit. He fired the next set of drones, layering sequences in a rhythm that no AI could predict. The breaker recoiled again, this time more violently. A pulse of energy erupted from its body, knocking out some of the monitors and shaking the station, but Lucas did not falter. He had calculated for this. Talia shouted numbers, keeping the drones in precise formation. 10, 12, 9, steady. Projectiles struck the breaker's pulsing surfaces in quick succession. Energy flared where no weapon had ever left a mark. The breaker's movements grew erratic, reacting faster than before, but Lucas kept up. Every drone, every cannon, every tiny opening in timing was exploited. Persistence began to overwhelm adaptation. The cadets watching from the safe zones were stunned silent. Murmurs of disbelief ran through the alien ranks. Some whispered, maybe it isn't unstoppable. Others stared in horror, realizing that the humans' determination was changing the battle. Brooks turned to Morris. We have underestimated them. Humans, they are impossible to predict. That's their strength. Morris nodded slowly. We've seen it in history. They survive where others fail. I thought I understood humans, but this is different. Back in the control bay, Lucas adjusted the drones once more. The breaker's massive form twisted, lashing spines in every direction, but he kept calm. Timing Talia, 1 second delay, left and right alternated. Talia complied instantly. The drones moved with perfect precision, striking at the breaker's momentary pauses. A flash of energy erupted and the massive organism staggered. For the first time, it recoiled visibly as though in pain. The academy shook. Alarms screamed louder. Evacuation pods launched in the distance. Cadets huddled in safe zones, watching the impossible unfold. A human had forced the breaker to react, not through strength but through timing, patience, and refusal to quit. Morris whispered almost to herself, How is this happening?" Brooks only watched, his face grim but fascinated. "Humans, that's how." Lucas continued, layering sequences faster now. The drones fired in waves, small projectiles hitting the tiny weak points he had studied. The breaker pulsed violently, spines lashing, energy flaring. It tried to adapt, but persistence was beating it. For every reaction, Lucas had a counter. Every adaptation, a timing adjustment. Cadets watched with growing awe. Whispers turned into murmurs of hope. Maybe it can be done. Alien cadets who had doubted humans began to understand that stubbornness and clever thinking could match raw power. Humans had survived worse odds. The breaker lashed violently, striking the station's outer walls. The control bay shook, lights flickered, and alarms blared even louder. Lucas's hands were steady, eyes sharp. He did not flinch. The drones fired again, projectiles hitting tiny gaps in the breaker's surface. It recoiled once more, energy flaring violently. Talia, hold the next wave steady, right side only, rapid fire sequence. Now, the drones obeyed instantly. The breaker's pulsing energy reacted violently, and for the first time it staggered backward. Cadets gasped. The impossible was becoming reality. A weapon, simple and human-modified, was affecting the unstoppable. Morris turned to Brooks. "This is unprecedented. The breaker, its movement, its faltering." Brooks nodded slowly. "Humans survive by refusing to stop. That is their edge. We have underestimated them for centuries." Lucas's eyes never left the monitors. He was calculating the next sequence, the next timing, the next small opening. The breaker pulsed, twisted, and tried to adapt, but Lucas had learned its rhythm. Persistence was winning. Humans survived because they refused to accept cannot be done. The drones fired continuously, waves overlapping, sequences interlaced. The breaker's massive form pulsed violently and began to weaken. Energy flickered across its surface and spines lashed wildly, but the organism could not fully recover. The patterns Lucas had discovered were exploiting its adaptive limits. Cadets watched in amazement. The breaker, considered unstoppable, was staggering under repeated, carefully timed attacks. Humans had found a way, not through raw firepower, but through cleverness, timing, and refusal to quit. The station shook violently. Alarms blared. Debris fell. Cadets huddled in safe zones, some crying, some shouting encouragement. Lucas kept calm, eyes sharp. Persistence was the weapon that humans wielded better than any technology. Talia's voice was steady. "Lucas, it's working. You're really working." Lucas nodded. "We keep going. We don't stop until it falters completely." The breaker pulsed violently, energy flaring across its massive body. It lashed spines, trying to strike the drones, but Lucas adjusted each sequence instantly. The organism staggered, recoiled, and then retreated slightly as though testing the human resistance. Cadets gasped. Morris whispered, "Humans, they really are impossible to predict." Brooks said nothing. He only watched. Humans had survived worse than this. They thrived where others failed. And now, a single human cadet had proven that even the unstoppable could be challenged. Lucas focused on the next wave, timing everything perfectly. The drones fired, striking tiny gaps in the breaker's pulsing energy. It recoiled again, more violently than before. The cadets watching could hardly believe it. A human had done what all fleets had failed to achieve. The breaker reacted, staggered, and showed weakness. And Lucas knew, deep down, that persistence, cleverness, and refusal to quit had won the first battle. The real fight was still ahead, but humans had shown their edge. The breaker had learned that humans did not surrender. And that knowledge alone was enough to make the galaxy rethink what humans could do. The breaker staggered in space, pulsing violently, its massive form twisting as it tried to adapt to the human attacks. Alarms screamed through the Academy station, debris floated in zero gravity, and the cadets in the safe zones watched in stunned silence. Lucas Carter did not flinch. His hands moved quickly over the controls, timing each wave of drones, adjusting angles and sequences with precision. Persistence was their weapon, and humans wielded it better than any technology. Talia worked beside him, coordinating every drone. Lucas, its energy pulses are stronger now. We need to time them perfectly or it could destroy the station completely. Lucas nodded. I know, we've been building up to this. It can recover slightly, but it cannot keep up with persistence. Every strike counts. The breaker's spines lashed wildly, striking drones and small parts of the station. Energy arcs lit the control bay and the alarms shook the walls. Cadets huddled, some whispering prayers, others gripping railings to keep steady. The unstoppable organism was testing their limits, trying to overwhelm them. But Lucas had studied every possible reaction, every moment of hesitation. Humans survived because they refused to quit. That simple truth was stronger than any weapon. Brooks and Morris watched from the observation deck, their faces pale but fascinated. This is incredible, Morris whispered. The breaker unstoppable, it's staggering, because of a human. Brooks nodded slowly. Humans survive by thinking differently. They find possibilities no one else sees. Lucas Carter is proving it now. Inside the control bay, Lucas fired another wave of drones. Each projectile hit precisely at the small gaps he had discovered over weeks of testing. The breaker pulsed violently, energy flaring, then staggered backward slightly. Cadets gasped. Even Talia's 3 eyes widened. The impossible was happening. The breaker, considered unstoppable, was faltering under careful, human-calculated persistence. Keep the waves coming, Lucas said, his voice calm but sharp. Don't let up. Even a fraction of a second can make the difference. The drones moved in perfect formation, alternating sides, timing, and velocity. The breaker twisted, trying to lash at the attacks, but it could not react fast enough. Each tiny opening Lucas exploited weakened it further. The cadets who had been evacuated were glued to the monitors, whispering among themselves. It's flinching, it's staggering. Brooks shook his head. Humans are impossible, he muttered. They survive where others fail. Morris turned to him. It's not strength, it's cleverness, persistence, and refusal to quit. Humans do not surrender. As the battle continued, the breaker pulsed violently and lashed spines toward the station. Debris flew, alarms screamed louder, and cadets were thrown against walls. Yet Lucas remained steady. He focused on timing and precision, not power. The human approach was methodical, relentless, and unyielding. Persistence was more powerful than raw strength. Talia, right side, 3-second delay on the next wave, Lucas instructed. She adjusted instantly, sending drones into perfect formation. Each strike hit exactly where Lucas calculated. The breaker staggered again, energy flaring more violently. It recoiled, twisted, and then paused, seemingly trying to understand the unexpected human tactics. Cadets whispered in awe. It's reacting to a human. It shouldn't even notice us. How is this possible? Brooks looked at Morris. Humans survive because they refuse to accept impossible. Lucas is teaching the galaxy that lesson right now. The breaker's pulsing grew more erratic. Energy arcs struck the station walls, shaking consoles and causing sparks to rain down. Cadets gripped anything they could, holding on for safety. Yet Lucas's focus never wavered. Every sequence, every timing, every drone strike was calculated. Patience and persistence were their weapons, and humans were unmatched in both. "Almost there," Lucas muttered. "Don't stop. Keep every wave firing. The moment it falters, we hit it again." Talia nodded, shouting numbers and sequences to keep the drones coordinated. Cadets watched, some shouting encouragement from the safe zones. Hope was spreading. For the first time, the breaker seemed vulnerable. The massive organism twisted violently, spines flaring and energy pulsing. It tried to strike drones, destroy projectiles, and lash at the station, but Lucas's timing was perfect. Every small pause in the breaker's reaction was exploited. Persistence was winning. Humans survived not because they were strongest, but because they refused to give up. A massive pulse of energy erupted from the breaker, rocking the station violently. Consoles sparked, alarms blared, and some cadets fell to the floor. Yet Lucas stayed calm. He had calculated for this. Drones moved in perfect formation, striking weak points again and again. The breaker staggered, its massive form twisting unnaturally. Talia's voice rose. "Lucas, it's faltering more. The energy pulses are weaker." Lucas nodded, sweat on his brow. "Good, keep firing. We're almost there. Every strike counts." Cadets whispered in disbelief. Aliens among them stared in shock. The breaker, considered unstoppable, was being defeated by humans. Not brute force, but persistence, precision, and determination. The breaker's massive body twisted violently, then recoiled sharply. Energy flared, pulsing across its surface, and for a moment it seemed to shudder like a living being in pain. Drones continued to fire, following Lucas's sequences perfectly. The organism staggered backward, then slowly began to retreat, moving away from the station, unable to keep up with the relentless human attack. It's moving back," Talia shouted, disbelief and relief in her voice. Cadets cheered quietly in the safe zones. The impossible was happening. A human had forced the breaker to retreat. Brooks and Morris watched silently. "Humans," Morris whispered. "They survive because they refuse to stop. That's the key." Lucas proved it. The breaker, still pulsing violently, twisted one last time and then floated slowly away, staggering but alive. The station had survived. Drones floated back, some damaged but operational. The cadets cheered, tears in their eyes. Humans had shown the galaxy that even the unstoppable could be challenged. Lucas leaned back slightly, exhaustion washing over him. His hands were sore, his eyes tired, but he smiled. Persistence, cleverness, and refusal to quit had worked. Humans survived not because they were strongest, but because they did not surrender. Talia floated beside him. You did it. I didn't think it was possible, but you humans, you're incredible." Lucas smiled faintly. "We survive. That's what humans do. No matter how impossible it seems, we keep going until we find a way." Cadets who had been evacuated slowly returned to the station, looking in awe at the retreating breaker. Aliens whispered among themselves, trying to understand what they had witnessed. Humans, small and fragile, had defeated something considered unstoppable. Brooks approached Lucas, his face serious but proud. "Carter, you've shown everyone what humans can do. This is more than just survival. This is a lesson for the entire galaxy. Persistence and cleverness, never underestimating the impossible. Humans are remarkable." Morris nodded. "You've rewritten what was considered final. No one will ever say impossible about humans again. You prove that determination and intelligence matter more than sheer strength." Lucas looked at the retreating breaker. It was still alive, still dangerous, but it had learned something too. Humans would not give up. Humans would not surrender. And when they faced impossible odds, they would find a way. He turned to Talia. "We did it together. Humans, aliens, maybe this is the way forward. Understanding each other, thinking, refusing to give up." Talia smiled. "You're right. Humans are amazing." I understand now why you survive against everything." The academy slowly returned to order. Cadets repaired equipment, collected drones, and took stock of damage. The breaker had retreated, but the lesson had been learned. Humans could challenge even the impossible. The galaxy had underestimated them for centuries, and now the truth was clear. Persistence, intelligence, and refusal to quit made humans a force no one could ignore. Lucas walked through the control bay, exhausted but proud. Every cadet, every instructor, every alien watching knew that humans had survived something that should have destroyed them. The impossible had been challenged, and humanity had won. He looked at the stars, imagining the breaker drifting away, and whispered softly, "Humans survive. We always find a way." And in that moment, the Academy, the cadets, and the galaxy itself understood a simple truth. Humans were never weak. They were never fragile. They were relentless. They were clever. They were unstoppable because they refused to give up. The breaker had retreated. The station was safe. And Lucas Carter had shown the galaxy that human determination was stronger than any weapon, smarter than any calculation, and more enduring than any fear. The impossible had been rewritten. And somewhere deep in the stars, the galaxy took note. Humans survived when nothing else could, because humans refused to surrender.